Okay, welcome ICT101 students. As I said, I'm going to post a video. I think probably what I'll do is over the next couple of days post a couple of videos, and just because of the importance of kind of giving an overview of information literacy, what it means, going over some of these kind of models. So what I thought I would do is strictly in this first video go over some of the PowerPoint here, and then go back to our Blackboard site and go over that, and then I'll post another video either tomorrow, which would be Thursday, or Friday, giving an overview of the Chapter 2 PowerPoint. Okay, so I want to start here. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but I wanted to start by kind of going over some of the main points that I think are relevant and very important for you to get started in beginning the study of information digital literacy. So according to the American Library Association, the ability to use information and communication technologies to find, understand, evaluate, create, and communicate digital information, an ability that requires both cognitive and technical skills as well. So in addition to being able to think about how to interpret, how to interact with the information that we can find, because really at the heart of this issue is the fact that we as knowledge workers have access to a great deal of information at our fingertips. And we can access that information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year throughout our lives. We have access to this vast amounts of information. So the important thing, and I can speak to this for a minute from my own experience, as I mentioned in class, I do a lot of grant writing. And part of my ability to be able to do that grant writing is being able to find information. So employers have looked upon my skills of being able to find information, sift through the information, pull out what's good, what isn't good, and then make sense of that information for myself, and then to convey that information to others. So there's a lot of cognitive stuff going on there in the process of trying to find out what the information is good, what the information is, how to process the information, evaluate its effectiveness in terms of its relevance toward my project or projects. But in addition to that, and as mentioned on the slide here, there are technical skills that are involved in that as well. Well, we talk about technical skills. We have to talk about how we get the information. Well, we have to be knowledgeable on how to use the tools to get the information. And so, what are those tools? Well, computers, cell phones, the databases that the libraries have, being able to do searches, search for the correct terms, understanding what the information being presented to us is, being able to navigate through it in a digital format. So the technical skills come into play there. And of course, they cross over. The cognitive and the technical skills cross over in many places throughout the process of trying to figure out what information is. Okay, so the information literate learner must combine the knowledge of how to find, evaluate, and communicate information within the context of a digitized environment. Okay, so I'll move on here. So components of information literacy, and these are a couple slides here, and really at the heart of this, and this is the heart of doing your research. I mean, you have to identify a problem. Anytime, and I'll use an example of an information technology project here. Oftentimes, I do a lot of work with implementing new tools, technology tools into organizations to help them improve their organizational services, the flow, the workflow, processes, and all kinds of things. As I mentioned, years ago, I was involved in a grant on the federal level to oversee some technology implementation to improve both teaching and learning at Mount Aloysius College. And one of the things that I saw right away when I began this work was that a lot of times I'd get a group of people together, and that group of people, I would ask them to go and do some research to find out what tools are out there, what technology tools are out there that are being used for teaching and that can help improve learning. Well, they oftentimes would find something, do a Google search, and find something really cool that looked really cool, sounded really cool. They would read some reviews, and then come back with, a great deal of zest in wanting to implement that. One of the problems with that is that if you don't think about how it fits into your organization's structure to identify a need or a problem, then there are oftentimes many, many errors made in terms of implementing something new into an organization. Okay, so that's why this first step is very, very important, is defining based on a need, a problem, or a question. Okay, so that's the first step, defining. The second is define. So once you define what the need is, what the problem is, what the question is, then you're going to go out and find. So you're going to go out and locate, access, retrieve information from a variety of print, electronic, and human information sources. And then after you find the information, you're going to evaluate the information for its credibility, currency, meaning whether it's relevant to today, to your needs right now, the reliability, validity of the information. As you know, anybody who has a little bit of knowledge, now you don't even have to be able to write HTML and do all kinds of fancy high-end tech skills to create websites. Really, anybody with a bit of technical knowledge can create websites. And just because I can create websites and I can create some really cool websites doesn't mean that I'm knowledgeable in all the areas that I may claim to be. If I'm putting a website together about the South Indie Afrikaans birds, I could find some information about it. I could sound like an expert, but the information probably wouldn't be credible, reliable, and valid. It's because I'm not an expert in that area of those birds. Okay, so we have to learn how to evaluate that information, because a lot of the information out there is bad. So we have to learn how to evaluate the information. So then after we do the evaluation of the information, we can say, yes, this is good, this isn't good, this will work for our needs, this won't work for our needs. We sift down and we have some information that's going to help us. Now we can begin to organize that information so that it can be used to address our need, our problem, our question. Okay, and then once we have that information organized, we're now ready to communicate that information to others. And how do we do that? Well, how do we communicate? That's a good question. We communicate verbally, so we could verbally pass that on to others. We could communicate in writing. We can write to others, whether that would be in a formal paper format, an email, whatever. We're going to write the information in print. There are other ways that we can communicate the information as well. So by, for instance, presenting the information. So we found the information, now we're going to present it to a group of people with our findings. And so maybe we create a PowerPoint. Okay. So those are the steps, the components of the information literacy in the digital age. So go here and talk about this idea of critical thinking, because really what this entails when you're talking about evaluating the information, now you're taking your thinking to another level. So these are the steps in the critical thinking, as kind of components of critical thinking that are important. So being able to infer, okay, to make inferences about the information, being able to analyze the information, evaluate it, again, evaluate it for its effectiveness, to interpret the information, say, yes, this means this, and it doesn't mean this, this will fit our needs this way. So we're interpreting the information, and then being able to explain the information as well, and that goes again in the communication of the information to others, so explaining it to others. and then synthesizing the information as well. So making sense of it as it is presented to us. So creative thinking then is the process of actively exploring the possibilities and then generating alternatives. This is a really important one, keeping an open mind toward change and combining ideas to create something new, and then finally viewing old concepts in new ways. So maybe we had a mindset going into this after we did our process of gathering the information, most likely learning something new about whatever it is that we are researching, and then combining those ideas, we create something new, whether that's a new work, a new project, a new idea. Now we have a different way to look at or view things that we maybe thought of before. Okay? All right, so this really goes back to the idea of problem solving. So these are the steps in the problem solving process. Okay, it's very important that we begin by defining what the problem is. Okay, so we have to really define what the problem is. If we don't have a clear definition of the problem, the entire process of trying to problem solve is going to be a mess. Okay, so we define the problem, and then after we define what the problem is specifically, then we can look for the causes of the problem. Once we find the causes of the problem, we can develop solutions or alternatives. Okay, so we define, look for causes, looking for what caused this to happen, and then we're going to develop, think about alternatives. How can we fix this? Okay. Once we have that in place, we have the notion of what can help solve the problem, and we can begin to evaluate the alternatives, and then evaluate each alternative, and then evaluate the end result. So after we put the alternatives into place, then we can evaluate whether they were effective or not. Okay, or whether they met our needs, or whether they solved the problem, or whether they answered a question. And if we can say yes, it did solve the problem, then we know that it was effective. If we say no, it didn't, then we got to go back to the drawing board and try something new. Okay. This is, if you're an education major, psychology major, you're probably familiar with this, Bloom's taxonomy. And this explains the different levels of thinking. Okay. And at the very basis of thinking is knowledge. Okay, so knowledge and comprehension, those kind of come in, and if you think about it for college courses, like a lot of the 100 level courses, 200 level courses, a lot of the coursework is related to this area down here, the knowledge and comprehension, where you have to memorize terms, definitions, concepts, theories, models, those kind of things. You're memorizing. A lot of that rote memorization comes in this knowledge and comprehension level of thinking. I mean, as you move up this kind of ladder here, the higher up you go, the higher the order of thinking that it is. So you go into application. Now you're applying that knowledge and that you have of that particular subject. And then you're going to, after you apply it, do an analysis of it, and then synthesize it. Okay? And then finally, the evaluation of it. So at the height of the bachelor's degree experience at Mount Aloysius College, you should go through this entire level of thinking from knowledge through evaluation. So because we said, communication is a big piece here, I thought it would be a good idea to discuss effective communication for a minute. So it's a very complicated process, and I'm going to give it about 2 minutes here of explanation, but we're going to talk more about this in class over the next couple of weeks. So the basics of communication is that the sender encodes a message so that then it can then be sent to others. Okay, so I'm going to have some thoughts in my mind or something I want to say to you. I'm encoding it, and then I'm going to say it to you. Okay, So then the sender selects and properly uses the appropriate channel of communication, which in my example would be my verbal speech, and then the receiver receives that information, which would be the words that I'm speaking, decodes it, and then makes sense of it. Okay, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong with this effective communication process. And it's not an easy process because, as you know, if you can think about it from personal relationships or workplace issues that you've had where communication has broken down. Well, why does communication break down? Well, it can break down from a number of things. So, for instance, if I'm in a classroom talking to you and there's a loud fan running, that noise can interfere with the process of our communication because maybe you can't hear me. Maybe only the students in the front 2 rows can hear me. So that breaks down. That's a barrier to effective communication. Well, there are many other things that could be noise, doing air quotes, noise as well. Such as maybe I'm not in a very good mood. Maybe I had something bad happen to me before I came into class, and I'm trying to convey information to you, but my mental state is not allowing me to effectively communicate to you because of what's going on in my head. Okay, so there's lots of things that can break down in this process of communication. But as this model shows, communication really being a one-way, that's not really the way it is. Effective communication is 2 ways, meaning that I'm sending you a message, you're receiving the message, decoding the message, but then how do I know that you get it? How do I know that you understand the message? Well, in order for you to me to know that, you have to provide me some feedback. That can be a shaking of the head, a nod, yes, I get it. It could be you asking more questions, you responding in a way that I say, you know what? Yes, he or she does get this. Okay? So it's a more complicated process than simply a one-way. It's 2-way. There are things that can get in the way of communication. And it's a very complicated process, and communication breaks down all the time in many aspects of life. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to end this PowerPoint part here, and then I'm going to jump over to the Blackboard site real quick. So this steps in effective research. First, again, step 1, defining the need. Then step 2, as we go up the kind of ladder here, or steps, finding the information. Step 3, evaluate the information. Step 4, organize the information. And step 5, communicate the information. That's really all what this course is all about.